Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation for the end of the world. As always, I'm your host, Brock Teal, and today we have got Jeremy Ferry on from Louisville Stain Looking Glass. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. So, you are a stained glass artist, and so what does that all entail?
I mean, because of the city I live in and kind of the nature of the business, a large part of what I actually do is repair and restoration on old windows. There's a lot of history behind like what time periods that stained glass started being more prevalent outside of like churches and incredibly wealthy people's homes. And that as an effect leads to a lot of that kind of work in the business. I also build custom windows and I like doing small pieces. It was kind of a thing when I was a kid. Stained glass was going through like a big boom in the 90s, and it had to do with the housing market. So when the housing bubble crashed, a lot of the stained glass industry went down because a lot of it was people buying up homes as investment properties, and then they would pay to have these things added on to them to increase the value of their investment. Of course, not treating it as an investment instead of a domicile, which is not what you should do with a home in the first place. But so there were a lot of like suburban gated community homes, McMansions that they had, really ornate bathroom windows put in. So there was a lot of that in the 90s. But as a result of that, it was a big boom time, and there was a really strong hobbyist community. My dad was teaching classes the whole time when I was a kid too. So I still do some retail sales, which is actually very rare for stained glass artists. But because my dad was teaching classes for over 20 years, I still have people coming that learned from him years ago that need to find some place to get glass. And outside of me, the only place here is Hobby Lobby, and their selection's not very good. So that's a part of the industry that I kind of uniquely do compared to other people. But after the housing bubble burst, a lot of the places went down. So on one hand, there's not as much work, but on the other hand, there's not as many artists. I'm the next youngest artist in town. Like the next one after me is like 30 years older than me. So yeah, they're all pretty much retirement age or more. Most of them are working out of their garages or basements, and it's all guys my dad knew, 40 years ago. So I definitely have a bit of a niche hold on the market. On top of that, I do lamp repairs, which is nobody likes doing them because they're just kind of a pain and take a long time. And they're oddly expensive for how little repair work needs to be done. They just take a really long time. And since that's mostly what you get charged for when it comes to this kind of work, it inflates the cost. But it's weird. I find it weird. I don't put sentimental value into the stained glass as much as other people do because, it's something that I make. So people will pay, two times as much as the Sears Tiffany lamp that their family bought in like the 60s that their grandparents gave to them. They'll pay twice the cost of the original lamp in order to have me fix 8 or 9 broken pieces and reattach the cap. Whereas they could have just bought the same lamp brand new for less than that. But the people put a lot of sentimental value into stained glass, more so than it seems to other things.
So does those kind of lamps, do they appreciate and value any, or is it just, could it in the future, like maybe when we have like floating light orbs that follow us around the house, someone's like, I remember when great grandma bought that for us. I have the hollow video of them getting it repaired. Is there any possibility for appreciation at all, or is it just
there is somewhat
completely sentimental?
Is somewhat. Obviously, if you have something that's made by a company that has a well-known name, if you have an actual Tiffany lamp, that can appreciate in value. It's kind of playing the art game. Anything is worth what people are willing to pay for it when it comes to art. That's largely what it comes down to when it comes to my work too. So if you have something with a name on it, then potentially it can be worth a lot. Old Tiffany lamps can be very, very sought after and expensive. But a reproduction lamp, you're talking about less than having the value. A lot of it comes down to basically the cost of materials plus what you can get somebody to pay you per hour. So, like my dad did a reproduction Tiffany lamp. They call it the Willow. It was a really famous one. Very intricate. It had an irregular edge at the bottom, which made it more difficult. But just buying the reproduction base that goes along with it, you can only buy them from the Tiffany Museum. They reproduce the glass and the old hardware that they used to make those. So just the base alone was, I think, $10,000.
Wow.
So obviously it's going to be an incredibly expensive lamp because the base alone is, as much as a car for some people.
Yeah.
But
so I can see.
Yeah.
So what would a replacement or what would a repair cost be for? You said it was like double the lamp's original cost. So is that like a $20,000 repair job for 8 or 9 pieces of broken glass?
No, see, that's the thing is you're not having to pay for the materials for the entire lamp. So the base cost is already going to be lower. But
Okay.
I mean, what I charge is basically $45 an hour plus materials. The reason why it takes so long is that because of the way that the lamps are put together, you can only replace one piece at a time. You have to take the shade. You actually have to trace the broken pieces opening, which usually you have to remove the broken glass and the existing foil. That can take 15-20 minutes. Then you're going to have to trace it and cut that out, and then you have to grind it until it fits into the space. That can take another 15 or 20 minutes. And then you're going to have to actually wrap it and solder it into place. You're looking at an hour's worth of work for each piece that's broken. So somebody brings you in a lamp that's got 5 broken pieces and needs the cap reattached, and they're like, well, so like how long is that going to take? And you're like, well, that's like a day, literally an entire work day, just to do the broken glass, and then I'd still have to reattach the lampshade or the lamp cap the next day. Which is why I actually tell a lot of people that like I love doing preemptive work. It's one of the reasons why I like making small stuff. I hated when I was a kid that stained glass always seemed so cost prohibitive. Like it really, I mean, even the smallest piece that my dad would make and sell in his shop was well over $100. So that's why, starting as a kid, when I worked at the shop all through my like early teen years. I would always make stuff for really inexpensive to sell, to the point that I made an entire window display when I took over the shop after I quit my previous career. And I made stars that cost $12. I had feathers, which you'll see a lot of on Instagram. I actually did them out of artistic protest because all of the ones that I see online are not based off of actual bird feathers, and it irked the literalist part of my brain. So I actually took bird feathers, specifically like flight feathers from different birds, and did my own designs. But that was so that I had something I could sell for, $20-25. Because most people can afford to get that for a friend or for their own home.
Yeah.
Whereas spending $250 on this really kind of like abstract looking ribbon thing that my dad made might be cool, but most people can't afford that, especially now. I mean, it may have been a little bit more viable back in the 90s. Honestly, I was too young to know exactly what the economy was like back during my childhood. But yeah, so there's a lot of the business I spend. I actually charge a lot less than I probably should for a lot of people. But I feel like stained glass is one of those things that if people just let it, it'll just kind of go away. I mean, there's always going to be somebody who will be doing the repairs, but new work is becoming more and more rare. I mean, you might find it in some large cities where they have lots of business infrastructure that are willing to pay for that kind of thing, but that's not the majority of cities in America. Like I said, there's a lot of repair work for me. That's because Louisville has a very, very large standing Victorian neighborhood. Not the largest in the country, but it's up there. And specifically, late Victorian period was the first time that stained glass became less cost prohibitive. So you started seeing it in like middle class homes. And then U of L the University of Louisville, is right next to Old Louisville, which means all these old Victorian homes that had like decent stained glass in them got turned into apartments for college kids. So I get a lot of broken front doors from drunken college kids, stuff like that. It sucks, but at the same time, I'm getting to work on windows that are, from the late 1800s that I really get a kick out of that. I'm big on the history of this stuff. It's one of the reasons why I don't want it to go away, because I know that there is nobody younger than me that's doing this professionally in this town. If I stop doing it, it'll be gone in 10 years. And I mean, we have a large standing Victorian neighborhood. As a result of that, we have a lot of people that have stained glass in this town. I mean, it does get washed out by the kind of like commercially made stuff that people buy from Lowe's and stuff like that. But it's just not the same, No. And
it never is.
And you don't get to have any uniqueness in it. And usually I just don't even like the textures of the glass they use. That's been a big problem, actually. The largest producer in the U.S. Announced closure, I want to say 4 years ago. There was a big panic because that was like 40% of the glass produced in the U.S., all from one company. It ended up getting bought by another company and moved to Mexico. And we've been having to deal with the production lines not coming out the same. The glass doesn't cut the same. The textures aren't the same. The colors aren't the same. And like that was the reason why that company was so big, was because of their consistency, and that's completely gone away. And that was a lot of the glass produced in the U.S. At the same time, I think 3 years ago, there was like a 27-year-long study done by the EPA on glass producers. It caused the closure of several companies for long periods of time, required them to put billion-dollar bag house filters on their production facilities. Some of them are still suing the EPA because there's some questions about whether or not the findings were actually accurate. They didn't take into account other surrounding businesses that produced similar problems for the environment. Specifically, the one I know of is they found a high level of chromium from one place. They didn't test the fact that there was a chromium producing plant that made gravel across the street. So, and these, like, I mean, they're well-known companies now, but we're talking about Bullseye Glass, a company that was started in the 70s by literally 4 hippies that did not know anything about glass. And they built up a company making some of the most unique stuff ever just because they invented their own processes. And now they're getting shut down because they can't afford to put billions of dollars into infrastructure into their business at the drop of a hat. And they were never a $1 billion producing company. They make glass. They make pretty glass. That's the problem when it comes down to it. Is on one hand, economically, art is not ever really fully appreciated in that way. So, like, again, I don't put as much sentimental value into this stuff as other people, but I do put artistic value into it. I know other artists that do incredible work. Even my dad produces some stuff that people still come into my shop and see the windows that I have on display, and they're like, "Oh my, how did he even do that?" And well, he invented the process. It didn't exist. That's one of the things that's really cool about stained glass is there are rules that you have to follow to make sure that you have structural integrity, but beyond that, the sky's the limit. You can do anything. If you can wrap something in lead, you can get it into the middle of a window. It doesn't matter if it's glass or not. There's a lot of things you can do to play with it. But like, that's not the majority of what we get to do these days because it's kind of the nature of the business. The more exciting stuff actually came during the like most vapid aspect of the economy during the time when everybody was just trying to make houses look unique in the 90s. Nowadays, a lot of the stuff I make is pretty strict Victorian style. A lot of people like that around here because it's what they see already, so they want to reproduce it. And arts and crafts. A lot of times I'll try to convince people to let me do something that like matches the style of the home rather than what they've seen in the neighborhood. to try to give it some uniqueness. So I have some pretty decent salesman pitches that I learned from my dad when I was a kid. And it's pretty easy to sell people on stuff with glass, actually, because you have the added bonus of almost never having an audience that knows what you're talking about. I could make up terms and they wouldn't even know. I never do that, but so yeah, it's a weird business to be in right now, but working for yourself, I mean, I got to be honest, this has been better than any other business during the pandemic. Probably. I can communicate with clients. I can send them photos of stuff. I did have to cut off doing offsite work for safety reasons, because I live with my father. I take care of him. He's a late stage cancer patient and he's elderly. So if I get sick, he'll get sick, and if he gets sick, he'll probably die. So that's I've definitely had a few conversations with potential clients, and they've been upset about the fact that I wouldn't come out to their house to do some kind of work. And I'm like, look, if you thought that potentially doing a small amount of work to make another person happy might kill a family member, how apt would you be to do it? Like, it sucks that I have to go that far in explaining it to people, but I really had to do it several times.
What sociopath even gets upset over that?
I mean, I worked in restaurants for like 15 years. There's plenty of them out there. The same kind of person that wants to murder a server because some dude overcooked their French fries.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's 320 million people. Somebody's got to be an asshole, I guess.
Well, and then there's always there's always going to be a base percentage of people that are like literally sociopaths, just functioning sociopaths that nobody is really entirely sure about. Although usually their family does know. But
yeah,
I mean,
it's
a lot
of self-aware people you got to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, it really does take. That's actually one of the reasons why you probably found me was because of TikTok. One of the reasons I went on TikTok, I think, because I followed one person who did like a duet with Lizzo or something. It was stupid off of Facebook, I'll admit that. But then I got on there and I did the same thing that apparently it does to everybody else in their like early to mid 30s, which is it started telling me I had ADHD.
Yeah. Right.
Funny enough, I have APD. I have an auditory processing disorder. They diagnosed me with that when I was like 13. And when I was in elementary school, they tested me for ADD like 3 times. 2 times they didn't even tell my parents about it. And then my mom threatened to like sue the school. Of course, since then I found out there's some other wonky stuff going on with that. But they kept telling me I didn't have ADHD or I didn't have ADD. And then later on, they gave me this APD diagnosis, and they essentially told me it sucks that your hearing is like off, but you'll learn coping mechanisms naturally, and by the time you're 30, it won't be a problem anymore. That was literally what they told me when I was 13 years old.
The schools in the 90s were weird. No one else, to my knowledge, remembers this, but I remember being walked into the hallway and the sheriff's department taking our thumbprints for whatever reason. Like,
I heard that story from somebody else. They did not.
Thank you. Vindication.
I don't know if it's like based off of like I don't think you could have gotten away with that at most of the schools that I went to. Like I went to a very liberal high school. We have a magnet program in the city that I live in, so you can choose to go to any school in the entire district. You don't have to go to a home school, and they all have different programs. So there's so many people from across the city. You can't go to the school in like the bad neighborhood and do that because one of those kids might be like the son of the CEO of LG&E. Like you really don't know. So I don't think they can get away with that in most of the schools in my city. But again, like the testing they did when I was in elementary school, totally illegal to test a child without telling the parents. And then, when TikTok told me I had ADHD, of course, I started researching it, and I talked to somebody, and she asked me to describe the tests that they had me take. And I described them, and she goes, well, 2 of those were ADHD. She goes, that other one was an IQ test. And I was like, what?
Wow.
And she goes, yeah, one of the tests was an IQ test. She theorizes that they knew that I had ADHD, but that because my IQ didn't test low enough
They
to
couldn't kick you out of school or something because your test would
or
affect the curb.
they couldn't justify giving me any what are they called, like allotment, like they couldn't justify giving me more time on tests or letting me go quiet environments or anything like that because I was too smart. I wasn't testing stupid enough. Of course, the heyday of cats testing when all this stuff was going on, they loved testing back in the 90s.
Oh my god, they loved
it. But yeah, so she theorizes that they knew I had ADHD and they didn't tell me. And then after TikTok telling me that I had it, me doing all this research and finding out all this stuff that definitely seemed to point to it, I said something about it during a holiday Zoom call to my family. And my mom goes, yeah, so when you were about 16, I had lunch with the woman that assessed you for ADHD, and she actually told me that you and your sister probably have it, but that you fell through the cracks because of the early testing was really bad. And so, yeah, that was a revelation. And then I talked to this was a PhD researcher into autism. And she said, wait a second. So they said that you tested positive for ADHD? I said, yeah. And she goes, and you have sensory processing problems? I said, yeah. And she goes, that's autism. And I was just floored by that. So,
yeah.
So yeah, it's been a weird bit of time, but
that is wild.
It kind of makes sense because I do have the processing problems, and like when I was a kid and they told me everything would get better, they weren't that bad. I didn't really even find out until later on that a lot of how it affects you has to do with stress. So when I chose to work in restaurant kitchens, which were very loud and had lots of background noise, I stressed myself out for 15 years straight to the point that I kind of like blew out parts of my ability to self-soothe because I like tortured myself in kitchens. It's one of those things when you have a disorder, you've had it your entire life. You don't know that it's different for other people. I just thought that everybody, like, I just realized last week that I have really bad tinnitus. I thought that everybody heard ringing in silence. I thought that's what silence sounded like.
Oh, wow.
I thought a low-level ringing was just what everybody heard when they didn't hear anything else, like when you were out in the country and there were no sounds. And it wasn't until like last week that I realized the ringing had gotten louder. And I put in ear filters, and it got even louder. And I was like, oh, that's a ringing in my head. That's what tinnitus is. So, like, yeah, when you have something your entire life, you don't know that it's different than other people until you have some kind of experience. So, the whole time I was in kitchens, I didn't even realize what was going on. Like, I'm selectively mute sometimes when I stop processing sound. I didn't even realize that. I thought I just liked communicating with hand signals because it was easier. And then I realized there were people who were like, dude, I asked you questions and you literally didn't respond. And I was like, oh, I couldn't process human speech anymore. I was selectively deaf too. Once background noise gets so loud, I stopped being able to process all sound. And it's something like, I didn't realize this until I was in my 30s. So it's kind of a messed up thing, but it makes sense now that I got out of those kitchens after so long and being traumatized by it and ended up working in a quiet studio by myself. And all of my like hobbies, I always choose things that are incredibly solitary and don't really require any hearing ability. But I didn't realize this over the years, like, watch modding and repair, beekeeping. These are all things you do by yourself. And you don't need anybody else. In fact, other people just kind of get in the way. So moving on to art actually did a lot to help me with my mental health for the simple fact that I stopped traumatizing myself every night. When it got really bad, I was having like panic attacks on like Saturday nights in kitchens, and I didn't know why. I'd been doing it for most of my life. At that point, I couldn't really understand what was happening to me. But yeah, eventually I had a doctor explain it to me. So yeah. So art's really been a saving grace, at least when it's come to that. It's up until the pandemic, I basically made just as much having a weekend job and being an artist as I did as a full-time cook. And I mean, some of the years as a full-time cook, like one of the reasons why I traumatized myself, I was a sous chef at a French place, ended up becoming the executive chef. It was the highest position I ever had. I was working like 120-hour weeks.
Jesus.
That was considered like normal.
Yeah, it normally is. Like
it
a
was,
lot
yeah.
of high tier chefs, they're there like prepping the food after closing, re-prepping and like taking counts before opening, and like so those crazy hours are really, to my understanding, are really common.
Oh yeah, they are. But the thing is being like neurodivergent, I didn't realize I was at the time, but I think that made a big difference. Because when I came into work and I saw my chef back wearing the same whites and maniacally polishing oven knobs, I didn't just go to work. I went and called the owners and was like, y'all need to check on Chef. Like, there's something really wrong with this guy. They couldn't indoctrinate me into the like full machismo of a kitchen. You could indoctrinate me to torture myself by wanting to be a workhorse, but like the weird political games that cooks played with each other, I just didn't have any interest in it whatsoever. They didn't know what to make of me because of it.
So machismo, what is that?
Just the fake mass. Like they always in kitchens, you're always taught to talk to each other in like very military terms. You're like a unit. You're working together, and part of it is like you're not a military unit. So when they started talking to me like that, I'm like, so should we get paid like somebody that gets hazard pay? Because that's what it's sounding like to me when you're describing how great we are at our jobs. Like, I don't think we're getting paid enough then. Because at the time, cooks our pay had been stagnant for 35 years since like the early 80s. So I was having some guy like, it just didn't work on me the way it did other people. They would do the same talking points that they tried with other cooks on me, and it just never worked. The one was the chef that was 50. He was in his like early to mid 50s, and he's explaining to me that he made the same amount when he was working in my position as I am now, and that's why I should be happy with it. And I said, yeah, Michael, that was 30 years ago. You are not accounting for 30 years of rising in inflation and the rising in cost of housing and food. Like, I did the numbers for restaurants. I watched the prices of food go up for 15 years. People can't tell me it didn't happen. I literally watched the price of an egg go from 5 cents to 25 cents over my career.
Yeah. Especially because some of these more, like any place that has a sous chef, they're going to want more quality products. So with the more industrial kind of like spit out eggs, they're 5 cents, but they're also garbage. So if you want like the good kind of eggs, they are going to be those 25 cents a piece.
Yeah, and even if you do try to find those, you'll end up finding like weird stuff. I remember there was one free range egg company around here that everybody told us to try out. So there's only two ways to get chickens to lay. You either have to have a rooster around, or you have to give them what they call hatch feed, which actually has a hormone in it that induces the. Well, if you don't get the hormone level right, it can cause some weird stuff. The first order from Dutch Farms, this company, I got 100 eggs. All of them had double yolks.
That's kind of dope, but at the same time, it's
a little startling too.
Yeah, that can't be good.
I had to do some research as to what caused that, and then I had to call them and be like, yeah, we're not going to buy any eggs from you anymore because your hormone levels on your animals are off by a lot.
Yeah, and that can't be good.
Yeah, so you can find the good stuff, but it's like an entire second job finding where to source it from and then dealing with the actual people.
Yeah, you almost have to find those hippies that like, no one makes good at glass anymore. Let's do that.
Yeah, but the problem is the hippies are hippies, but they're also boomers. which means they're really into capitalism. So if you take an ex-hippie turned boomer that's now at retirement age, they're not a hippie anymore. Instead, there's some dude that calls himself a farmer, comes in wearing boots and overalls that are completely clean.
Yeah.
And sells you some
that's
stuff
a red
that looks
flag.
like and he sells you stuff
flag.
that looks like you got a box of it at the farmer's market.
That's a red flag.
So you do have to do a lot of the groundwork for it, but that industry, it wore me down, and not realizing that I had the multiple disorders that I have made it so much worse. So going to stained glass was me going back to the thing I had done when I was like 15, 16 years old. When I first quit and started working in restaurants, actually, was when I was 16. So, it's very different. I miss the kitchen. I don't miss the industry, though. The last straw for me was there was a chef. I think he might have been on Top Chef or one of those shows. Honestly, I was working so much at the time, I didn't watch TV. But he was a contestant, not a winner. Somebody who probably got knocked out early on. Anyway, he had a restaurant in, I believe, North Carolina, probably Charleston, because that's where everybody goes. And he was like 31, 32 years old, maybe. At the time, I think I was like 29. And he worked himself to death. He was feeling ill, but he kept going to work. He was working 20-hour days, which was the same as what I was doing. It's where you cry for an hour, sleep for 2, and then go back to work. And he literally he didn't show up to work one day, and his parents went to check on him, and his immune system had shut down while he was in his sleep. He literally worked himself to death with the flu. And he was a year older than me, and that was I knew I couldn't be in the industry anymore after that, and I left. And shortly after that was a time period that they now call the Exodus. I don't know if it happened everywhere, but it definitely happened here. In Louisville, we have a very large restaurant community compared to the size of our city. So I knew a lot of people that all left the industry all at once. Everybody just realized the pay was not worth it. The recession came in, and nobody could even afford to live off of the amount of money that we were getting. The only reason most of the cooks were eating every day was because they were eating at work. That was part of being a cook. You were getting 2 meals a day at work. It was part of your pay. Literally, people would tell you that. And then at the same time, they would try to do stuff like make you buy your own coffee because you drank too much. I'm like, well, don't have me work 20 hours and I won't need 3 pots, dude. But so I left during the mass exodus. Tons of people left, and we immediately went from having basically everybody would get fired in the same way, which was there are so many cooks in this town that are out of work. We don't need you. If you don't want to do it, then just leave. We'll hire somebody else in 30 minutes. To immediately having a worker shortage.
I love when they do that. It's if you don't want to work here, somebody does. I'm like, yeah, that's a problem too. That's a different problem that needs addressing.
Yeah, and there were some reasons for that. There was a proposal to raise restaurant minimum wage in our town that came up, and somebody from a restaurant leaked a letter from the owner's email to the city, basically talking about how it would kill the restaurant industry to actually pay people fairly.
No, it would.
No, it wouldn't, because it hasn't in places where they've done it, and because that's not how the market works. Part of the real reason why restaurants never could really indoctrinate me is because when I was a kid, my dad had books on collective bargaining that I read. He was a member of a union before he became a stained glass artist. He was a sheet metal worker, and he was part of the sheet metal workers union, and he had all these books on unions and collective bargaining. And I read those when I was 12, 13 years old, just because I read everything and soak it up like a sponge. And so people would start talking to me about it, and they're like, hold on, that doesn't make any sense. If you're saying that increasing the pay of the customer, of your worker is going to cause an increase in the cost of your good, then that means that you're not paying your employees based off of how much they're producing, which means you're failing as a capitalist. That's anti-capitalist. You're not supposed to be basing their pay off of what you can pay them. It's supposed to be based off of their productivity. So they couldn't pull that stuff over on me. It would work on other people, and it just didn't work on me. So it's one of the reasons why I loved cooking, but I never really fit into restaurant kitchens, and it's because I just didn't believe any of that stuff when they told it to me. It was too obviously just like a grift that nobody else could see, apparently. So working for myself, getting out of that grift, that was part of the it's one of those things where, like, under capitalism, until you can see it, it really feels like you're going crazy. Where you're just like, wait, am I supposed to be able to survive and, like, actually live a good life off of this stuff? Am I just failing? That's what everybody thinks under capitalism.
Yeah, no, you're supposed to get a credit card and die with $40,000 in debt.
Yeah, and the problem is that, like, you can't across generational lines, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I literally remember one day having a conversation with one of my coworkers at my weekend job, and he was insane. He told me basically that segregation of schools shouldn't be gotten rid of because one time he got beat up in a park by a black kid. Yeah. And I was like, dude, you realize that the fact that you got beat up might have a lot more to do with you than anybody else.
Oh,
I heard the story. I was like, on top of that, you realize how ridiculous it is to say that all schools should not have been because of this one incident. Like, so that story gets related to one of our other coworkers, and he's like, yeah, that's insane. Just because you don't deal with something or you do deal with something doesn't mean that it's actually a problem.
Yeah,
30 minutes later, we're talking about the difference in economic wealth amongst the different generations. And I'm like, yeah, your generation was generally more well off than mine. You had more years outside of a recession in order to, gain capital and wealth that we didn't have. And he goes, I'm not that rich. That didn't happen. And I went, you do realize this is an exact reversal of what you said about that other story a half an hour ago, that just because you're not in a particular situation doesn't mean it's not overall true, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Like,
Harvard students could work at a restaurant or a grocery store and pay for an entire year's worth of college.
Yeah. It's just, it's just really funny to see. Like, I think that's part of me being neurodivergent, that, like, I've always seen this and I didn't realize that, like, other people didn't see it, but, like,
yeah,
the logical philosophical inconsistencies that most people run with on a regular basis, I don't understand them. It's one of those things, like, it took me a long time to realize that I conceptually understand what people do, but, like, I've never actually understood it. I know that people do things from observation, and I try to, like, act like them, but I don't really get why I'm doing it most of the time, other than it is to make other people feel better.
Yeah, camouflaging is weird like that.
Yeah, which a part of my personal journey since discovering that I am definitely neurodivergent has been to stop doing that, and it makes people real uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah. I think that was, I think a lot more, I think I heard a lot more guys are less likely to camouflage like that. That's more of a female trait, just because they try to fit in more. But you can find anybody that'll do that. So it's actually really interesting to hear from somebody who, because I have heard some just from random readings and just random bits of knowledge absorbed from different audiobooks and TikToks and stuff. Because, you'll get, like, doctors, like, explaining entire symptoms in, like, a minute-long video in just random bits of knowledge. I'm like, I did not know I was going to learn that today, but apparently the universe had different plans.
Yeah. Have you ever read or heard of The Curious Incident of the Dog at Midnight? It's a book.
I did not. That is an interesting name, though.
I think it actually got turned into a Broadway, which ended up being, like, really big. It's a very interesting story. I'm not sure how much veracity to put into all of the writing, because it's kind of written by a non-autistic person, but it's supposed to be written from the perspective of an autistic person. But I still found some interesting insights into it. And the one that got me was, there were two different things. One was the car game. and it was that this kid, you're seeing everything through his eyes with his internal monologue, and he's talking as he's like in his head as he's going to school. He's telling you that he plays this game where he decides whether he's going to have a good or bad day based off of the number of yellow cars that he sees on the way to school.
Oh, no.
If it's an even number, he's going to have a good day. If it's an odd number, he's going to have a bad day, like that. And he's in class and he's talking about having a bad day. And his teacher is like, why is it that when you see a certain number of these cars, you determine that you're going to have a bad day? And he goes, well, you decide whether you're having a good or bad day on whether or not water is falling from the sky. Like, is it really that weird?
Yeah. And at least he has some semblance of control, because it's a system that he developed. It's not just based off of random weather patterns.
He's gamifying his emotions. If anything, that should make a lot of sense to the gaming community. But
yeah.
But that was one, and then the other one was when he internally, he never said this to anybody, but he was saying that neurotypical people are lazy. Like, in his opinion, all neurotypical people are lazy. He's like, you go into a room and you're a neurotypical person and you see that your friend's in there and you start having a conversation. He's like, your brain doesn't pay attention to anything, just that your friend's there and you're going to have a conversation. He goes, my brain, when I walk into that room, I know how many light switches there are, how many chairs there are, how many tables there are, how many ceiling tiles there are, what color everything is. I quantify the entire room. He goes, and none of you all can do that. And when you see it from the other side of somebody calling regular people lazy for not, it gives you an interesting perspective of like saying it in the opposite direction of like, oh, this person is so odd because they just don't see things the same way that I do. Like, it's in the end, everything is absurd. You can delve down to absurdity on anything. A lot of that led to me I've gotten into paying attention a lot to disability rights and stuff like that. I've got a number of friends who are disabled. We all get together. A lot of it is we're friends because none of us can drive because of our disabilities. One of them's got spina bifida. The other one, he's got epilepsy. And with my APD, I can't drive because road noises basically cause me to like become incredibly anxious.
Really?
It's not
now. Is
safe.
That a personal choice or is that state sanctioned?
It's not state sanctioned. I just literally, I can't even handle being in cars most of the time when I'm not driving. I can only imagine what it would be like being behind the wheel. But like, yes, if I'm at an intersection, even in the passenger seat, and like, the driver is waiting to turn, I can't tell how far away noises are. Sometimes I can't quickly tell what things are. So something that might be a block away might sound like it's right next to us. And I've actually caused the driver to flinch with me flinching just from hearing something.
Jesus.
So if I can be that dangerous in a car as a passenger, I can only imagine what it would be like driving.
Yeah, it's probably not the best idea.
Yeah, but the thing is that like up until about a year ago, I always viewed me not driving as a personal failing. It wasn't part of my disability. It was just something I couldn't handle because I wasn't like other people. So it's only been since, figuring out all this stuff that I've actually realized that there's nothing wrong with me. The world just kind of not built for people like me, which is really the basis of disability advocacy in its whole.
Yeah.
So
do you think stuff like that will change once like companies like Tesla brings out a more reliable auto drive function? Do you think that's something you might be able to run with? Because I believe that they're trying to run out cars that are around 25 to 30K, which for a self-driving car is not a terrible price.
Yeah, it's not that, but I don't know how much credence I can directly put into a company like Tesla, considering some of the things I've heard about, at least their production and their safety rating. But I would like for that technology to, like, I've told people for a long time, even before, I think the first time I really started talking about it was Minority Report. I loved the way the transportation was in Minority Report, but you also realize that that transportation would be entirely based off of restructuring every aspect of transportation in the country.
Yeah.
Considering we are like 50 small countries, I don't know how viable of that is widespread or except for like over a very long period of time. Part of the problem is like you kind of have to convert all the vehicles at once in order for something like that to be safe. Like if you have
it would be difficult. It would be difficult to have just that many people, like say 20%, because that sounds about right. Like there'd be some guy that would just like some dude in a big truck. It's just like I'm king of the road, and he just pull over really hard, and the Teslas just start panicking.
Exactly. So like I don't know how that kind of technology interacting large scale with an also large scale amount of human of like human error. I don't know how that would work out. Mentally, I cannot figure out how that would work well at all. And like I don't know if that is even like really a goal for those companies.
Yeah. It's always a goal, because at the same time, if like I think Tesla has a pretty good privacy policy, at least for their map systems and where you go and what you do. But if you had like Ford or GM and Google said, hey, or hell, Google's got their own self-driving branch they mess around with. So if either one of those companies was like, Google, would you pay us so-and-so if we told you where Jeffrey and Brock went last Thursday at 6:00? We see their vehicle went somewhere, but, if you want to know for advertising purposes, we'd be more than happy to pay you or have you pay us.
Yeah. Part of the problem is, okay, so I've been playing Cyberpunk a lot lately.
And how has that nightmare been going?
It's actually not that bad. Since the updates, it doesn't crash nearly as often. I still like the story and the world. I know that like some aspects of the game are pretty broken. I also was an early buyer into No Man's Sky, and I still play it. So I do believe in the power of games turning around. I got No Man's Sky for $19 used the first week that it came out, and that game is awesome now. Like it's a completely different game than it was from just it's basically become a new game like 3 or 4 times while I've owned it. Just everything about it changes. It's still really fun. I think part of me, I enjoy playing solo games where I don't really have to interact with people. So anything where I can go long term and just explore and never really have to interact with anybody is like really awesome for me. So, like, I play a lot No Man's Sky and Elite Dangerous. I definitely believe in games that might have sucked at one point. They can become much better later on.
Yeah. So, speaking of games that don't suck, have you ever played Horizon Zero Dawn?
No, my brother has it. It's actually, like, right next to me, but I haven't picked it up.
It's fantastic. No multiplayer, just you, yourself, and I. It's a fantastic game.
He liked it a lot. I've got a twin brother, so he liked it a lot, but then he said he didn't think I would like it. He never told me why.
What?
We're weird like that. We have insights onto each other, but I'll give it a shot anyway, just because eventually I'm gonna get done playing Cyberpunk. I started a second playthrough. That's the only reason it's taken this long.
Wow, a second playthrough. I could possibly think why you wouldn't like it. Like maybe the aspect of a female main character, but you don't seem the type of person that would care. There's not really like anything like, don't get me wrong, it is a very innovative and like groundbreaking game outside of having a female protagonist, but outside of that issue, it doesn't.
The gameplay kind of like Far Cry-ish?
Okay, yeah, a little bit.
That's why he said it, because he knows that I'm only iffy on Far Cry. I kind of like playing it sometimes, but I'll never play for like extended periods of time. Just something about the repetitive nature of doing the same thing over and over and over again. Like,
the only thing that is like collecting gas canisters to make fire bombs. To just create ammo. Yeah. Just collecting stuff to make ammo. I mean, that's the only repetitive thing.
I'll give it a shot. I keep getting an ever-growing list of games that I need to try. Luckily, there's nothing new coming out anytime soon that I want.
There's not.
Yeah.
Like that was something I said earlier on in the year. Depending on how Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Cyberpunk was going, like Fall Guys and Among Us are up to be the best games of 2020. Like there's
is it Among Us from like several years ago?
I think it was like 2018, but it was so like nobody picked it up. Like I was telling my friend, I would have loved to be the person that, like, imagine the person, like the few hundred people that are like the original Among Us players, and then all of a sudden they're like telling everybody how great this game is. Everybody's like, nah. And then like Pokimane and AOC are playing Among Us on Twitch, and they're like, what? Where was this when I was playing this game?
I mean, the early adopters, what can I say? I used to wear ties with T-shirts before Avril Lavigne made it cool, but, you got to get over it at some point.
Yeah.
I actually had an extensive tie collection before that happened. It really annoyed 13-year-old me a lot. But,
oh, no. So, with your stained glass, how does one actually stain glass? Is that like a
thing. It's not really done anymore. The name stained glass specifically referred to early glass art where they used what was called silver stain. Mm-hmm. And it was a stain that I believe it did actually have some silver alginate in it. But it, depending on how thickly you put it on the glass, it would produce anywhere from like a light, like amber yellow, to like a dark brown, and you could even get it almost black. But it was really only one hue. And it was done specifically for like the type of painted glass that would go into churches, that now you'll see colorfully painted glass. At the time, that was how they would do it, would be just one hue. So the name stained glass is pretty archaic and not really accurate anymore. A lot of people nowadays will call what we do art glass, because rather than actually staining it or painting the glass, we're really just using colored glass and putting it together that way. There are still people that do glass painting. I know a couple, and it is a skill I would love to have, but I do not have a steady hand for that kind of thing. But yeah, art glass is really more popular or more accurate. Just stained glass is such an old term that it's too much a part of the vernacular for people to kind of let go of. So a lot of people will kind of like lie and tell their customers that it's because the glass is stained colors. It's not really.
Yeah, but they don't know any better. Like you said, you can make stuff up. Yeah. So you said that it's welded. So I originally saw the video that you made when you were making the stained glass APOM. How many different type of Pokemon sculptures do you do, or any other nerd type sculptures?
I have a lot of designs that I've made the design of. Like, I've drawn the design, I just haven't had the time to make them. But I did the APOM. I did another Pokemon like 5 years ago for somebody. I can't remember. But really, it runs the gambit. I did an Elder Sign for some people that do a Call of Cthulhu tabletop game. They wanted to get the Elder Sign that's like their party's sigil, so they had me make that. My little sister did some painting work for that. I have a sister that can do some of the painting work. So occasionally she'll work with me, which actually she is currently unemployed, so I might be able to get her to do some more work now that I'm thinking about it. We did a whole series of skulls that went over really well, but she's been too busy to paint them for a long time, unfortunately. Yeah. But I've done that. Right now, I still have half of what was originally an entire display of Mario. I actually had Mario. There was a Goomba. I did one of the piranha plants coming out of a pipe. I had a brick block and one of the question mark blocks.
Wow.
I sold about half of it. I still got the Mario and the Goomba. And I did some of the mushrooms. I did a 1-up and one of the red ones. So, that's fun. And God, there's so many I've done the designs of that I just haven't had a chance to do. Of Pokemon video game characters, symbols. One guy wanted me to do a Mega Man, and he never contacted me back, but I did the design for that one, and it's so cool. I've wanted to do it for a while. I just can't justify taking the time that it would require and not making any money during that time. So yeah, that's the unfortunate side effect of actually doing this for money, is that I don't end up doing the stuff that I really want to do most of the time.
Yeah, that's a lot how art goes. It's a lot of what people want, and while you're excited about getting paid for it, it's not really what drives you.
Exactly. So I've been trying to set aside time so that I could do some more of my own designs, but I just keep having more and more customers come in. I think it's people that have been like stuck at home all year looking at the same broken window that's been broken for like 5 years, and they're just like, let's get it fixed. I'm like, wait, your side light's been been broken for the better part of a decade, and now you want me to come out in a pandemic to remove it and do the repair on it because you just don't like the way it looks, but you didn't care for the last 6-7 years.
Like, that's exactly what happened. I mean, people's houses for the longest time, maybe not when your dad was up and kicking, but more or less like us, maybe like for the past, I'd say maybe 10 years, houses have really just been body lockers. But now everyone's forced to be inside of their homes during this pandemic, and they do actually have to stare at that broken side light.
Yeah.
It's there. It reminds them. Like, they just have to walk by when they leave or come back from work and be like, it's kind of ugly, but I can live with it. But now they literally have to live with it.
Well, and most of the time, I mean, people have spent so much time working, they're hardly paying attention to that stuff when they are home. When they're home, they're still answering emails and calls from their bosses and stuff like that. I mean, I think one of the things that really, one of my favorite movies ever is Goodfellas. I know that's a little cliche, but I remember watching it, like the special features on it once, and they have like several different commentaries. So I've watched it with all of them. And there was one where they were talking to a guy who was actually the guy who arrested the main character in real life, like the actual FBI agent that did it.
Wow.
And he's talking about how terrible a lifestyle these gangsters actually lived. And he goes, because, capitalism, you base everything off of the amount of time that you spend in order to get it. He's like, so in the movie, the guy's wife is talking about how he's willing to work really hard so they can have the little extras, and it's showing like the rock that slides away to show the big screen CRT TV back then, and all this stuff. And then the commentary the guy's doing over it goes, these guys essentially worked 24 hours a day. What kind of compensation would you require to actually feel like you're making a decent amount when you work constantly?
Yeah. Well, that's a thing with like that's a thing with like small businesses, and I don't really think you would quantify what happened in Goodfellas as a small business. But
they might.
Like, yeah, they might. They certainly might. But that is a thing. Like, you can, as a employed person, you will work 40 hours a week and still complain that the hours are too long. But as like a small business owner, you'll work 80 hours a week and just be like having the time of your life.
Yeah. And I mean,
and maybe you get even paid less.
Probably get paid less, and you have to pay both sides of FISA that other people don't, and you have to pay the self-employment tax that other people don't.
Yeah. It's still fantastic because you don't have a boss and you can just do whatever you want.
Yeah, and I think I came to the conclusion that I come from a long line of people that can't stand to have bosses. I didn't really think about that until, but like both of my sisters worked. They were like upper management in retail at craft stores, and both of them left to work at a bakery. And the only reason they worked at the bakery is because essentially they were allowed to do whatever the hell they wanted because the boss loved them so much that she just let them run the place, basically.
Yeah.
And then like my dad said the exact same thing, and he was working in a union sheet metal shop for his own father. So if you can't stand to have your own dad as a boss, you're probably not very good with bosses in general. And I mean, I worked in kitchens for years, and I did well, but it's because I just kind of quietly worked. Like, if I ever actually tried to talk to anybody, everybody just thought I was weird. Like, I didn't fit in. I talked about history and philosophy and weird stuff that most kitchen folk don't. I would have to, like, talk about music in order to get people to actually talk to me. I did work in one kitchen where it was like kind of the aisle of the misfit toys. We would have really weird conversations, but at the same time, it was kind of dysfunctional because we would have really weird disagreements too. Like, I remember two guys getting into a fight over who had accurately said which members of Red Hot Chili Peppers were on the cover of Blood, Sex, Sugar, Magic. One of them insisted that it had John Frusciante on it, and the other one insisted that it had Dave Navarro on it, and they got into a big argument about it.
That's a wild conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Also the same place that, like, I once saw a guy when he thought he was in the kitchen by himself hit a crack pipe into the and like blow it into the hood. Yeah, yeah. It was I don't know how to describe that place. It's a tourist spot that a lot of people in my city don't really like. The mayor, like 20 years ago, set aside a whole bunch of money to be earmarked to make this like fun zone, and it's just, I mean, if you need to get drugs, it's a really good place to go. You can ask any security guard, and they got you. But yeah, that place is kind of a basically like when I read Kitchen Confidential and they would talk about the restaurants in the 80s where it was like a pirate ship and you could basically do whatever you wanted. That was the only restaurant I ever worked at that was actually like that.
Yeah.
We're like, if you came in one day and somebody was selling illegal guns in the back to all the cooks, you would not really be fazed by it. Like, you'd be like, oh yeah, I can see that happening. And then you just, start mopping the floor or something. Because it's just another day.
So what else do you do? Do you do anything else besides your stained glass business? Because it sounds like there is because you sound like you really like cooking. You just don't like the hyper stress of an entire unit behind it.
Really, it's just the industry as a whole. It's entirely built on squeezing every last ounce out of your employees. Like, mm-hmm. I broke early, but I broke early because I had extenuating problems. All the other cooks that I worked with, they're broken now too. It just took them a little bit longer. Give them another 5 years in, and it happened to them. It's, you either work your way up to being the guy that breaks other people, or you get out. That's it. I eventually realized I couldn't do that to other people. I think that was a lot of what it was. Yeah.
Have you ever thought of doing like a food truck? Because those are getting really popular now, especially with the pandemic and like how restaurants can't. Well, you said you had sisters, so
yeah,
I could see you like hiring your sister to paint glass and then drive and take orders.
I'd love to, but that sister is she has a lot of jobs. She only lost her bakery job, and that was because the bakery decided, after being open this whole time during the pandemic, that they were actually going to have to close temporarily. And the only reason they lasted this long, it's a top 8 allergen-free bakery. So one of the reasons why my sisters both work there is they both have celiac disease. So they could actually eat the stuff that they produced, which you can't do at most places. And then my mom's got a corn allergy, so I have a lot of history with cooking for people with like crazy allergies. Another thing that helped me a lot in my in the service industry. But both of my sisters are fiercely independent. The closest I could get is maybe getting my brother to drive, but like getting him to do anything is pretty tough.
I know the feeling, man. I know the feeling.
Yeah. I mean, no, he helps take care of my dad a lot. He does all of the driving to the appointments. I can't fault him for that. And he Uh, Part of the problem with my APD is my recall of spoken information is pretty bad. I tend to write everything down. Um, so my brother does really good on talking to doctors. He actually remembers all of that stuff in order to be able to remember it later and respond back on it. I tend to get very confused if I try to do that too much. Uh, yeah, it's really crazy that it took me as long as it did to realize how weird I was compared to other people.
No, it's really not. I mean, I remember listening to an interview with Elon Musk where he said he was like thinking in 4D chess, and he just thought everybody thought like that.
Yeah, I mean,
So I mean, it's not really because like if everything's like super normal for you to like with the tinnitus thing, like
yeah,
if you're
yeah.
like, and even with like some doctor visits, like I remember a joke, and it's kind of a joke. It's also kind of a reflection on how like reality is for some people, where someone was like at a doctor's office, and the doctor said, "So 0 out of 100 or 0 out of 10, how's your pain?" He's like, "Well, it's about normal." And the doctor says, "What's normal?" He's like, "About a 3." He's like, "No, normal is 0."
Yeah.
So a lot of people like they because we're adaptable. Humans are very, very adaptable. Like
Yeah. Well, and there's one thing that like
frighteningly so. So once something happens and then you're there, it's like amputees. They're like one thing to happen is like it's almost better. I can't remember exactly what it was. I believe it is almost better for a person to be an amputee from an accident than to lose than to like get like a lottery or something, because the amputee, you always go back to your base level happiness. So you'll be depressed for losing your leg for a while, but then you'll like adapt to that circumstance and find your way back to base happiness. But someone with like $1 million will have that exceedingly high, and that'll kind of like up their normal base happiness. And then once everything falls apart like it normally does for some lottery winners, then they'll have to be like, "Oh no, my new base level is down from the other base level I established." Something to that effect. I'm butchering
yeah,
this
but I mean, when
man's
you
work.
think about it, essentially you're talking about like going up another step from on like the hierarchy of needs. And like yeah,
Yeah.
you are going to have a new base level, but like that's not an incentive not to move up. If
Oh
anything,
yeah.
that's I got really into Taoism when I studied philosophy years ago, like when I was in my 20s, just because it was the only one that like really made any sense to me from a non-egoistic standpoint. But that was I realized after doing more study, because I'm not the kind of geek that can just surface level anything, that a lot of Taoism was like twisted and used in weird ways over the years, and the fact that they had essentially the Reformation that happened in China, that the meanings behind everything had been entirely changed. But trying to do research onto what it had meaning before that, it was put forward as the idea that at least somewhat to a degree it was a instruction manual for the emperor. And I realized that if you look at it that way, then essentially it says if you keep people fed and stupid, then they'll never revolt against you.
Oh no. That's
And
absolutely true.
that is absolutely true, but that's the flip side of what you were just talking about. Like if you keep yourself stupid and fed, you'll be happy because you never moved up. You never realized how stupid you were before that.
Yeah.
Or how base level it was compared to other people. That's the hilarious aspect of like the way capitalism works, is that we look down on people in America if they don't produce capital, like it's a moral failing.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like we don't reward people for their moralism. It doesn't work in the reverse. It doesn't make sense. No rich person is ever going to use a moral reason for why they should have more money, except for like Ayn Rand or something like that. But like, most people don't fall for that level of just absurdity, at least in my experience. I don't know.
Oh no, they do. They do. Somebody will implement a tax, like a new tax for the rich, and then people under $50,000 a year will get more pissed off than the rich people.
Yeah, but I mean, usually part of it is the people being stupid, but a lot of it's marketing, which I know it's weird to be anti-capitalist and hate marketing at the same time, but I don't know what else to call it when you change the name of the inheritance tax to the death tax to make people not want to vote for it. The majority of people that suddenly became against it when it was the death tax, it didn't change the tax at all. They just changed the name, and people were that gullible.
Yeah. Well, because we're so influenced, like we're easily, like it's weird, like the Patriot Act. It's not the giving the government complete control of your phone calls and emails act. It's the Patriot Act. It's like voting against the Save the Puppies Act. It's like nobody's going to vote. Like it could literally activate martial law at the flick of a switch, and no one would vote against the Puppy Act.
Probably not.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Like I really don't like it when they give names to bills. Like
the cute names bother the hell out of me. If anything, I think that there's some aspect, just like with law, because I mean, if you think about it, legal proceedings have a lot to do with political proceedings. There should be a level of boredom involved. Like you need to have some level of kind of like record keeping and regularity that will inevitably become boring. Like if it's not boring, then I don't know. It worries me.
It's kind of like with the impeachment, where just like they just decided we're not going to impeach Trump at the Senate level, and then Mitch McConnell gives a 20-minute speech about how Trump definitely incited the people. The people who stormed the Capitol definitely thought that's what Trump was telling them to do, but we're not going to impeach him.
Well, that's why Mitch McConnell did what he did. I guarantee you he whipped votes against voting for impeachment while voting for impeachment himself, so that he later on could say that, like, yeah, what Trump did was bad, but we needed to prosecute him not as a president, but as a American citizen. That way, if this ever happens again, we don't have the legal precedent to do this while he's still president.
Yeah. Which is weird, because they always act off... Yeah, they always act... It's kind of weird how they act off precedent when precedent, plays with them. Like, especially, like, they were talking about... they were kind of crying over how they were going to use budget reconciliation to pass through the Biden's COVID-19 bill. They're like, no, you need a filibuster-proof 60 votes. And everybody's like, well, that's not what you tried to do when you tried to get rid of Obamacare. You used budget reconciliation, and McCain was the deciding factor on that. So what's up with that?
Because, and I mean, I've said this before to much of the chagrin of my right-wing family. I mean, I live in Kentucky. They're bound to be here. But
Alabama, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're in a boat. Oh, we're in a boat.
Yeah, it's weird being in Louisville because we're like the mostly liberal boat floating in a sea of rural like just people that will. I mean, I understand why people in rural Kentucky vote the way they do sometimes. Well, we are an incredibly messed up state on so many levels.
Wait, isn't Mitch McConnell's y'all's senator?
Yeah, exactly.
He is. Yeah, no, like you're like, no offense.
He lives up the street for me, dude.
Wow. I mean, no offense to because he does live in. I knew that sounded familiar. Yeah. It's like his fake bougie residence because he has to technically have a living place in the state he's senator of.
He honestly, I don't blame him for not coming here very often. If he ever goes out,
no, I would.
Well, if he ever goes out in public in the neighborhood that he lives in, he literally gets pelted with like garbage. Like people hate him here. People hate him with a passion here, and it only pisses us off even worse when he's eating at the local Cuban spot. So, why not go throw your leftovers?
Yeah, Mitch's. Old Mitchie's really weird.
Yeah, but like you think about it, Kentucky is one of the most corrupt states for low-level corruption. And people are like, how is that even possible? Because we have 120 counties. We have more counties than California.
Yeah.
We have counties that are so small that they are literally a crossroads with a lamppost, and that's it.
Oh, yeah. They're gerrymandered to death, I can only assume.
Voting is done on county level.
Yeah.
So all of that stuff is already controlled by this. Then the state government constantly does shit to mess with the larger liberal towns that, like Louisville, that produce most of the revenue for the state. We get they tried to. I lived in a neighborhood that was it had gotten federal funding in order to have the neighborhood fixed up. It was the original neighborhood that was here before Louisville was a town. It was called Portland. It originally was a city. Now it's part of Louisville. They wanted to build it up. Federal money got set aside for this. The state decided after we got the federal funding that they were going to cut off the guaranteed money that they had given to a development project on our waterfront. Because of that, the city didn't have enough money to pay the development group that had done that, or that had done the work. They were actually trying to, this had never happened before, unprecedented, take federal money set aside specifically for fixing up a neighborhood in order to ensure that they had free parking at the waterfront.
So that's what the money was supposed to be used for, but they reallocated it to another project?
Yeah, and that's because another politician that you might recognize, we have Andy Bashir now, everybody, Daddy Andy. Yeah. He's done a very good job during the pandemic for the most part. Before him, we had literally the most hated governor, one of the most hated governors in the country. People hated Matt Bevin and didn't even know he was our governor. They just knew they hated him. They saw him in the news, they'd see him say shit, and they'd be like, man, that guy's an idiot. And then I'd have to point out that he actually was essentially led the executive branch of my state.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, a lot of people, like, everybody gets all riled up during, like, national elections. But what you said, and I've said this before multiple times myself, and this is honestly the first time I've ever heard someone say this without, like kind of hinting at it, but we're 50 different countries. You're absolutely right. Nobody realizes, like, you do more by changing your state. Like, weed legalization, that doesn't happen at a federal level till it happens through half of the states.
There are two sides to the issue, though, because then if we do look at everything, that's the very statist way of looking at things, what was commonly considered, conservative. But that's actually not what conservatives do. They want to use federal level stuff to push through their personal ideals. They never actually gave a shit about having a small government.
When it helps them. Absolutely.
But at the same time, like, you go, oh, well, if you just don't like the way things are done in your state and you don't have the power to vote for that stuff or vote for change, then move. It's a very Ben Shapiro way of saying things. It's like, oh, just pick up and move. Everybody's got enough money to do that. Dude, I don't have enough money to move across the street, much less to another state, the other side of the country, another country. These are things that are literally would cost so much money that it's an inconceivable idea that I would ever be able to do these things. And on top of that, depending on where you live, you may never have the economic opportunity to actually earn that much money where you are.
Oh, Kentuckians aren't moving anywhere.
No, I mean rural Kentucky for sure. You might.
That's almost that. That's almost those poor, like, redneck Appalachians, like poor. Like, I don't mean like. I mean poor because they are poor, but I mean those poor people. Like, it's like
a lot of the reasons why they're poor, especially like if you go out to like Harlan County or Jenkins, any of the places out in actual Appalachia, those people know they're poor. They also know that the reason why they're poor is because their families literally fought a war against coal mining companies. And like they are poor because they chose not to work for those people and be dirt poor and slaves. They're poor and free. they have a lot of pride for what they have now, and they actually recognize where it comes from way more than people do in a lot of other areas. I've got a lot of respect for those people, and granted, my family from West Virginia, they're doctors. They're not coal miners. They're brain surgeons. But
Yeah.
but at the same, I've got a lot of respect for people who will literally, cut off their nose despite their face in the face of something like that.
Yeah, because that's where the original term of redneck came from, to my understanding. They tied red bandanas to the back of their necks as kind of like the Vietnam armband that those kids had at the school in that honestly, one Supreme Court case.
We still have that kind of stuff, and honestly, I feel like that's something that, like, I don't think a lot of people know this. You know that it's basically illegal for teachers to go on strike in most places. They're considered.
Oh yeah. Oh, they fuck over.
Do you know where the first place that any teachers ever decided to go on strike?
Probably around
Jefferson County, Kentucky, my county. Our teachers decided, screw the federal government, screw the state government, we need to go on strike. And they were the first ones to ever do it as an organized teachers union. So we have a lot of the we like striking here. We see, you can still find the coal miners who are not Republicans, for lack of a better way of saying it, that understand that they fought for democratic ideals, not just like democratic as in like having a democratic government, but literally the ideals of like workers first that the Republicans will never encompass. So there's a lot of worker solidarity to be found in Appalachia, and a lot of people that support each other in the face of some of the most corrupt local governments that you'll find. So they kind of had to do that. There isn't a county in Kentucky where you can't find some story of a guy who everybody knows somebody literally got away with murder because their cousin is the sheriff.
Yeah, they knew the right
their
people.
Their uncle is the constable, and their aunt runs the switchboard at the jail. Like, I personally have met at least 2 people that admitted to me that they committed murder, and they just can't get arrested for it.
Yeah, and it's weird because again, you have those because there are some. I wouldn't say necessarily white. They are white people, but it's not a white culture thing. It's like that Scotland Viking kind of pride heritage where they just, regardless of what the person does, unless it's done directly to the family, you protect them at all costs.
Yeah, which I was just watching a video or a movie the other day that it was supposed to be kind of a love letter to rural Appalachia. It's a guy, J.D. Vance, who became a lawyer, but he wrote it was specifically about his mom and what she went through with substance abuse and him basically being raised by his grandmother. You find that a lot in Appalachia.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Alternative family raising you, and a lot of substance abuse problems. But the beginning of the movie, he was talking about how one of the things he loved was that in rural Kentucky specifically, in lots of rural places, there's a level of brutality that people just casual brutality that people enjoy. It's one of the reasons why when people talk about like why do lynchings happen in the South, I can understand it. There are people that just like do really violent shit just to do it
for no reason.
And it's one of the reasons why I never really felt like I fit in rural Kentucky. So while he's talking about how much he loves it in the movie, that like if somebody starts to fight with you, you can't back down. You have to fight them. You may get your ass kicked, but your family will help you in the end. That's a level of brutality I don't enjoy. Which is why the person that had me watch the movie were like, well, what did you think about the movie? And I was like, I kind of hated it.
Yeah, no. It's a trash concept.
I enjoyed the story, but I don't identify with that at all. That I view that as being part of the problem. That's the reason why we have the problems that we do. It's the reason why where else are you going to find Tennessee and Kentucky, the Hatfields and the McCoys?
Right.
Like people that are willing to literally fight for generations for
no reason. Basically no reason. Nothing that matters long term.
Yeah, so
Like I can't even remember. Like I even watched the History Channel series that they had about it. I don't even remember what it was, but I mean, was it? Before I say this, was it a murder?
I think so.
Okay, then I can possibly understand that.
It's
Anything
still
less than a
disputed,
murder, it doesn't matter.
but it's
No,
one of
no,
those
no.
things like,
It was a property line. It was a property line, and then someone
yes,
got shot. So it was originally over property line. That
yeah.
does not matter long term. The murder, then we might be able to justify a short term scuffle, but a
It was
property
very
line.
much along pride lines, which is one of the things of like, don't get me wrong, I understand taking personal pride. I don't understand taking pride in everything to the degree that I view the South is really doing sometimes. And like, it's one of those things that like people have a very different view of the South now versus pre-Civil War, because there was a lot of aristocracy down here that ended up becoming destitute. So now you look at them as being these like poor people, and that was always a large percentage of that. But we are also the South. We are a place that like sweet tea. The whole reason sweet tea was invented was to show how wealthy you were. That's
Yeah.
it. Tea was expensive, ice was expensive, and sugar was expensive. If you could put a crap load of that together and give it to somebody in a glass, you are literally looking down your nose at them and giving them a drink at the same time. That's what sweet tea is. And so
literally having your cake and eating it too.
Yeah, so like that is a level of pride that I like. Yeah, take pride in your work, but like you don't take. People take pride in everything sometimes to a degree that I just don't understand, and it's one of those things that like now I question whether or not it's because I'm neurodivergent or if I just I don't know. It's something I never understood, but I've always felt like the odd guy out. Like I don't know how it is. We don't have any NBA teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
We never had one. We don't have an NFL team. We've never had any major sports teams really from Kentucky at all. We have like a minor league baseball team, and we now actually have a decent local soccer club, but that's about it. So everybody is obsessed with college sports. Big Blue Nation. We are literally famous for how much we destroy when our team wins and loses. Like, it's one of the reasons why when people would talk about like the protests going on here, and they would be like, there was so much destruction. I'm like, dude, U of L looks worse after they win.
Yeah.
Like, what are you telling me? Like, downtown looks like a war zone? No, it doesn't. Like, UK looks like a war zone after the U of L UK game's over. That when half the street's on fire and like people are running around naked screaming and hanging from light posts, you're going to be like, oh, but this protest where people were peacefully marching down the street, that was the dangerous thing that happened here.
Yeah. I mean, Auburn, whenever Auburn wins a game, they literally TP a block.
Honestly, that's not nearly as bad as the number of couches that get set on fire at most.
Yeah.
But,
well, it's a different kind of like, I wouldn't call it violence, more of kind of like a pseudo violence. Like,
but that's the thing. If that's pseudo violence, then so is the violence from protests. I don't see it as any different. Both of them are an expression of essentially emotion or frustration in some way or another. How is it any different? If anything, somebody being oppressed for centuries and expressing that makes way more sense than somebody whose team lost this week but won last week.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no. But like it's wild.
But yeah, not being into college sports in Kentucky makes you the odd guy out, especially in Louisville.
Here. We got like, 2 football teams. Like any year going to the Rose Bowl, it's probably not much now. It's either Alabama or Auburn. And they're both in my state, and I could honestly give a less fuck. Like, I mean, you couldn't pay me to give more of a fuck.
I'll admit I don't know that much about Alabama other than
constant domination. I know that much. Constant domination.
See, the things that I do know about states ends up becoming like really weird. So I remember one day somebody was talking about like Louisiana and how much they love New Orleans, and I was like, oh yeah, Louisiana. They exist off tons of federal money. They're on like a statewide
Oh
deficit
my
for
God,
like decades.
yes.
And they're like, what? And I'm like, sorry, that's all I really know about it besides like the food's good.
I think per capita they're like -$5 a year, like
Yeah.
per person. I think they're like some crazy negative amount. Like whenever I feel bad about living in Alabama, I just go, Louisiana's right there, and they're probably worse than we are, and that gives me some solace.
And at least you all don't talk so damn slow. That really
Oh,
gets annoying sometimes. But I had an ex from Louisiana.
no,
It took
we
her
do,
about
we
2
do.
months to stop talking so slow. I was like, I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to speed up because my ADHD brain. I need something a little bit faster than that, please. Dear
Oh no,
God.
we do. We do. It's just when I was created, I something was wrong. Something happened to me, bit weird. I don't know what it is, but I'm like on like New York speed. Like I remember going to New York City, and the pace of the city was like, oh yeah, no, I can fuck with this. But everywhere, like down in the South, it's just like you're moving too slow. Get the fuck out of my way. Come on, let's go. I got shit to do.
So I feel like Louisville is kind of like nice and in the middle, but you can find plenty of places that go slow, but at the same time, we are a city. We do get stuff done. But yeah, this is a weird state to live in.
Mm-hmm. Dude, I hear you, man.
I haven't been able to talk to any of my extended family for like a year at least. It was bad enough with Trump and us disagree. Like, I just didn't talk about politics. I figured that would be fine. One of my cousins he graduated from the police academy right around the time of George Floyd's death when the protests broke out here too.
Yeah,
because that was when the news came out about the Breonna Taylor case. It was like literally the same. I think it was the next day.
Yeah, and then you had that one lady in the Ramble. I remember that I heard about that phone call first from the guy that was a bird watcher, and then the lady's like, "There's a black man attacking me in the Ramble," and then like a couple of hours later was George Floyd, and then the day after that was Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, well, and the Breonna Taylor thing
the
had been going on here for a while. That was what was weird about that was when the case first came out, even the local news really weren't covering it very much. So what actually happened was it was Kenneth Walker's release. He was arrested and in jail for shooting back at the police. They were not releasing him on bail at all.
Until I remember that. It was wild.
He had to fight a lot for it, and it was when he got released and he did his first statements about what happened, that was when everything blew up.
Oh, yeah, they definitely reported on that.
Yeah.
Black man shoots police officer and is then released. That was the headline, and that people were pissed.
There's so much about that case that, like, I don't even know if people paid attention to everything that's happened. Like, there's been stuff that happened since then that I haven't seen anywhere in, like, the national news. There was, I mean, I don't know how widespread it was known that the grand jury was coming out publicly censuring and suing the attorney general for the state.
Yeah.
They had to admit that that they had said that they produced evidence from the FBI that they actually had not waited until it had come forward or until it had been done to hold the trial. So all that stuff's going on. At the same time, the attorney general is trying to sue our governor for shutting down restaurants and bars during the pandemic because that's the really important thing to do. Oh, he also found time to get married to Mitch McConnell's niece. That's
lovely.
Yeah.
Congratulations to them.
He begrudgingly made them not give felony charges to a bunch of people who sat on the front yard of his house where he wasn't even living yet. He wanted to give them all felony charges until he realized they were actually famous people, and that if he did that, it was going to look really, really, really bad. And honestly, it still looks really bad.
Oh, yeah, no. Like, I mean, Mitch McConnell has got to be making so much, like, an ungodly amount of money to be putting up with the bullshit that he does not get paid enough to put up with.
Yeah.
Like, his Senate job does not pay him that much.
No.
And even now, being the House Minority Leader, he's even got a pay cut. I think he's back down to the 50,000, 60,000. No. I think their standard pay 70, and then the minority or majority leaders get like an extra 25 bump. So he's making like 75. He does not get paid enough to put up with that. So
no, but he's got plenty of money, so I'm sure
he's
somewhere.
I think his father has a shipping business.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how that works out. There's a whole bunch of weird stuff about his father's business and his wife's family's business.
Oh yeah. I think because I think their main customers are with the Chinese government, or at least with China itself.
Yeah, so his family member married the attorney general that was doing all this stuff, the Breonna Taylor case. One of the police officers, the main reason why my family won't talk to me anymore.
Wait. So you met the attorney general in Louisiana
sorry, the attorney general in Kentucky is married to Mitch McConnell's niece.
Yeah, but you said something about the Breonna Taylor case.
Oh, that was related to the Breonna Taylor case because he was the one that did the faulty prosecution on it. But there's other stuff that's come forward. The police officers that were involved got kind of like they tried to quietly fire them instead of actually charging anybody with anything. The one officer that is actually being charged is probably only being charged because after everything came out about the case, it also came forward that he had falsely arrested several people, including one person he did multiple times and ran a false investigation on until it closed down his business and forced him to move. He also had like 6 different people come forward and claim sexual assault on his part, including one that said that he actually essentially raped her while he was on the job. Which, if I know anything about police, they'll fire you for that for idling instead of actually raping somebody, because that would be a crime. But the reason why I can't talk to a lot of my extended family was because I told them that I thought the cops actually were in the wrong. Apparently, that was an egregious thing to do.
Oh yeah, no. Oh, it's a mortal sin in the South for the police to do anything wrong.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting here going like, we're from Kentucky. We used to run
police
moonshine.
Are your enemies.
We hate the cops. The cops were the ones.
My family too. My grandma ran moonshine.
Well, the cops were the ones that were literally on the side of the Pinkertons and the coal mining companies during those battles, shooting coal miners. Like,
absolutely.
And we were running moonshine. Like, we hate the law enforcement around here. The only reason why anybody likes them in rural Kentucky is because it's your cousin or your uncle or something like that. But you still don't like them as a cop. But for some reason, me living in a city, having an opinion even remotely similar to that, I'm like,
it's a mortal sin. It is a mortal sin.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm a leftist, like an actual leftist, not like an American leftist that's like essentially a centrist. Like, I'm not really a huge fan of the cops. I'm mostly a prison abolitionist. I don't think that any state ever should have the right to murder its own citizens. Mm-hmm. These seem like very basic things to me.
Yeah.
Radical for most people.
I remember explaining to family members, like, I can't remember the exact statistic. I would like to say I remember it as 3 in 10, but at the same time, that is such an egregious number. It almost sounds like an overstatement. Like 3 in 10 people killed are like actually innocent, provably down the line, or like evidence is mixed up for like capital punishment. And I was like, so off of that, death penalty is a no-no. If you accidentally kill 3 innocent people out of 10, even if all 3 of them were like wiped out entire families and that's why they're being killed, that's still not worth it to me. Like,
that's the problem when it comes down to it, is inevitably when it comes to some disagreements, there's going to be a common denominator that you just can't bridge the divide on. And that's one that I've run into a lot, is like when it comes down to it, somebody who believes that stuff should be done and me, we're just never going to agree.
Yeah. I have a thing. It's like I have a thing. It's what was it? It was, I believe it was somebody said something about I think it was the cops, one of the police officers that shot that lady in the Capitol riot. I believe somebody made a statement about how they were on the fence, or how somebody they knew was on the fence in a weird place because they were still Blue Lives Matter, but at the same time they were pissed off at the police for shooting her. And I was like, you know why they feel like that? Because they just got done spending $300 in Blue Lives Matter merch, and you almost have to pick a side at that point.
Yeah. See, that is the reason why, like, I just kind of came to the conclusion with a lot of my family that I guess it's part of the neurodivergent in me too. I've just started categorizing and listing what I just can't talk to them about.
Oh, right.
Like,
I'm a communist as long as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, but like that's the thing is they don't want to have actual in-depth conversations about the reality of things. They want to talk about the things that they believe, and to me, that's just boring. Like I hate saying it, but like facts aren't your feelings aren't your facts. I don't care about your feelings. Like I like actually learning about things, not the way you feel about them. So like. The conversations are boring at this point. They don't even have anything new to say. My mom the other day when we were having, it was my birthday, and we were having like a Zoom call, and she got mad and ended up me and my sisters just like decided to end the call, and it was because I told her that I thought that the Democrats probably, at least when it came to regulation changes, wouldn't go far enough, in my personal opinion. That, generally. I never feel like they go far enough. They usually underestimate how liberal or how left their actual base is and assume that they're more conservative than they really are. And then they try to temper everything so that they can make it so that the change doesn't seem big. And they're always going to have like this very incremental view of looking at things. I just don't personally agree with that. I don't think incremental change needs to be necessary on everything, and that some larger, far-reaching, decisions could be more quickly and better made. That's basically all I said. My mom first tried to argue that my opinion wasn't correct, which, of course, it's an opinion, so that's not going to work out too well. No, and then she said, I just don't care for your Debbie Downer stuff.
You're Debbie Downer. Like, my mom uses that shit too. Holy fuck.
I'm like, but if you're saying that my political opinion is wrong because you find it depressing, that's not a valid reason. That doesn't mean anything. I find lots of things in reality to be depressing to most people. I don't have a problem with them because I don't view things being the way they are as being depressing. It's just the way they are. I don't view it's like the, having a bad day because water is falling from the sky. I don't see a reason to attribute meaning to that in any way whatsoever. So when other people do it, it just confuses me.
Yeah, a lot of conservatives that have that kind of viewpoint, I feel it stems from religion, because religion, especially Christianity, because that's the majority of the religion. I mean, it's rare that you're going to find like a Muslim conservative, because he is not allowed in that club at all. But so it's a religion, it's God's word, it's written in stone, and that's just how it is. So with someone like you that like draws the lines, I'm sure like I don't really know if you're like a Christian or not, or if you're probably raised that way. Yeah. There's a lot of holes in every religion.
They don't like it when you see the holes either. It's like what is it? The Fnords?
Yeah. No. Like there's explicit verses in the Bible that state, do not discuss your shortcomings in religion. Like, don't talk about holes that you find in religion, because you're going to lead other people down the path.
The way that I learn is, part of it is because my hearing is so affected, my ability to learn, that I learn much better from being able to tactily handle things. So reading books, reading articles, working with my hands on things is how I learn. better than having somebody lecture to me. So the lecturing, which is the way that most people get evangelized or get proselytized to, it literally just doesn't work on me. My brain does not process the sound in a way that allows for me to be indoctrinated that way. So the way that I would learn about religion is by literally reading the books. And that is the easiest way to not want to be a part of that religion. It doesn't make any sense. No. You tell me God is a loving God. Really, how about the passage where it says, I will smash Jerusalem like so many clay pots in anger? That doesn't sound like a very loving God to me.
Oh, yeah, no. He's playing a single run.
There were 200 rules
that he came down.
Yeah, but that's what he came down from the mount with. We edited down to get the 10 that we want. We openly admit that. It's known. I learned about the Council of Nicaea in high school. Like, this is part of history. They can't ignore it. And on top of that, most of the time, they're not even arguing in good faith anyway. I can't tell you how many times I had a conversation that consists of, well, Jesus was proven to be a real person. No, he wasn't. Literally. There is no evidence of that. I know plenty of people who will state that as a fact, even non-religious people. There is no actual definitive evidence of it. There's no record that says specifically Jesus of Nazareth or signifies that it's anything other than a dude named Josh. If you found the name Josh written on a list somewhere, would you assume that was one specific Josh? No. And we didn't have names in the way that we did now. There's no what would have been Jeshua Bar, what was his dad's name? Joseph. That name doesn't exist anywhere. That would be Jesus's actual name, according to the way that they took census records. But it doesn't exist. It's all just based off of like really weird conjecture or like falsified stuff or just what somebody was told at Sunday school. And half the time, that's just a made up lie. Like, they're not even trying to make it a convincing lie. You're a kid. They just tell you what the hell they want to say. Like,
and then you're going to go to hell if you try questioning it, because that's the devil talking.
Yeah, except for, again, they don't even read their own scriptures, because if they did, hell's not even hot. The flames were supposed to be representative of the absence of God. That is supposed to be the only punishment of hell, is that you're absence the presence of God. Considering the fact that he doesn't talk to most of us these days, nobody's talked to any burning bushes anytime recently, and we don't actually have conversations with him. How does anybody know what that's even supposed to be like?
Yeah.
What is it that you feel now that you're not going to feel then? Because when people tell me that, like, they feel something, well, I don't. It's not that I don't want to. I just don't. I've gone to church.
Do you know how easy it would be? Like, if this was, like, real, like, miracles happen, like, and, like, do you know how easy it would be for just all this to be, like, 100% conceivable?
Yeah.
Like, it would be so fantastic if just like the Rick and Morty thing where the guy's like I must be killed by a powerful warrior to ascend to heaven. Like, do you know how easy our religion would be if it was like that obvious? You get hit by a car and the demons drag you to hell. Like, we need some of that shit. I need this kind of obviousness.
But that's the thing that like none of it ever makes any real sense whatsoever, because like the famous the treatise, I think it was Aristotle, or it was on God. It wasn't Aristotle. Who did say that? It was basically, if God is real, then he created evil. And if he didn't create evil, then where did evil come from?
Yeah.
Because he didn't create everything. And if he did create evil, but he can't overcome evil, and that's the reason why it still exists, then why would you worship him?
Yeah. Like if you throw enough, like, and again, like, let's go off of the fact that maybe he is real and he's like, he just doesn't give a fuck.
Then he's not a good guy. Why would I want to worship that?
Because he could literally send you to hell. Yeah, it's almost a hostage situation at that point.
I've listened to punk rock music for like 90% of my 33 years on this planet. I have no problem cutting off my nose to spite my face in boiling oil. Like, I don't care. That's the thing, is whenever they had the same, what if God came down in front of you right now? What would you do? a lot of people are like, oh, I would suddenly become religious, whatever. I would have a lot of goddamn questions.
Oh my God, I would have so many questions.
Childhood cancer, malnutrition, people starving, famine. The devil made all that and you couldn't do anything about it? You're a weak like you're a weak bitch.
Little Tommy dies of leukemia, but it's all like I love like it's kind of weird. Like when an old person dies, it's like it's okay, it's all part of God's plan. I dare someone to say that with a child with leukemia.
Yeah, a 4-year-old dies in a car accident. Nobody says that was part of God's plan.
Oh, some of the like serious Christians will like
and
some
they
of those
usually get punched in the face.
Those super self-righteous ones, but like they'll say it like in their like group. They won't literally walk up to the mother and be like, God's plan.
Yeah. And the only ones that do actually do it are like Westboro. They do that for money.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Dude, do you know how many members of their family are lawyers? That's the reason why they do what they do.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a money mill for their family. Some of them become lawyers. They just sue constantly for having their rights infringed upon. Yeah,
absolutely. My thing, like I can't even hate Westboro as much as I can't. Like, I mean, I literally like I don't have the energy. Like,
yeah, it's
the energy that it would take to hate them. The amount that they deserve is just it's nothing a single human can dish out.
No, like, I feel like that's a situational thing. Like if they were in front of me, yeah, I'll get that angry. But like from a distance, I just can't do it.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not. It's almost not worth it.
Well, and like I don't know what I'm gonna do. Try to harass their family members on Twitter or something. Like there's nothing effective. If anything, I'm a utilitarian consequentialist. If I want things to actually have either a good outcome or be useful. If they're not, I don't see the point in them.
Yeah.
So yeah. Which I have had joking conversations when discussing philosophy with people that essentially I use the cheat code because if you're a utilitarian and a consequentialist, you can justify basically anything. And it's true, but like it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, only if there's results.
Yeah, but like that's you. If you go too far, then you become an ends justify the means kind of person. Yeah. People are like, "Oh, that's not that bad." That quickly leads to might makes right, and that leads to some really bad stuff. So, yeah, I overthink things a lot. So that's one of the reasons why like having those conversations with people go really weird because it feels. I've had people say that it feels like I have an answer for everything. Like I'm not really sincere about what I'm saying because I just kind of always have something to say. And I'm like, I've played out this conversation in my head.
Oh my God. Dude, same here. Like I've had I usually don't go into a conversation really unless I've had like that conversation pre-planned in my head. Like,
yeah.
Like, I don't like talking about stuff I know nothing about. And when I know something about it, I find my stance, and it's pretty solid. Like, there'd have to be, like, fundamental changes to the concept for me to be like, then, no, you're right, I'm wrong.
That was the reason why Taoism was actually kind of fun. That's what got me into it. I had a buddy that was a Theravada Buddhist. We used to have some very interesting arguments, quite frankly. That had a lot to do with what got me into it because discussion on suffering seemed something that was actually useful to me at the time. I don't think people talk about that much here.
Oh, nobody wants to. I mean, it's
Western philosophy is always based off very much of like the ego. And you don't want to suffer. You don't want to focus on suffering when you're being egotistical about everything, because then it just sounds like you're having a pity party, or you're a nihilist. But you know.
Oh, and they're always fun. They're super fun to be around.
I mean, nihilism is fun to some degree, but like the most useful thing I got out of it was knowing how to spell Nietzsche off the top of my head. I can at least win in a spelling bee, you know.
Right.
But yeah, no, if utilitarian consequentialism is a cheat code, then nihilism is just breaking the game.
Oh yeah, no, it's smashing it through. It's breaking it.
just smashing the system entirely and just going like, see, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it never did, and it doesn't matter anymore.
Actually, the Boys, that's the TV show on Amazon now, but the comic book.
Yes. Oh my God.
The comic book was one of the few things that actually made me identify with nihilism to some degree, because it made me realize that like it all goes back to like the camouflaging, masking, learning how to like be part of society. And even when you were talking about like the pain scale, I realized that like a lot of things that I do when I interact with people to push across information about myself is performative to a large degree, to the point that I feel like a theater kid sometimes. Like everything is a performance, but it's because I am performing like normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the things that I see that other people do, I have to perform them, even though they don't feel natural or normal or like make sense to me. So yeah, I think I have been struggling lately. Part of like my whole post finding out that I was neurodivergent personality crisis that I've been going through is figuring out how much of the performative things are actually me and how much are not, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, how much of what you are is what you do?
Yeah.
Is a question I ask myself a lot. Because then people will derisively talk about the performative aspects of things. Oh, they don't really believe in that. They're just performing it. Well, would you ever say that to a theater kid? Performative, being a performative when you're a theater kid, that's how you show you care about something. That's how you put emphasis on it to show that it's important to you. So is being performative actually a bad thing? Why is it looked at so derisively? And if it is so derisive, what do I do about that? Because that's how I interact with most people. Like, I don't know how much of my viewpoint on the world is shaped by that. I think a lot of it is, but like I've never really contemplated it until since December, so it hadn't been long now. Yeah.
So, last question. We're about 2 hours in. Like this has been a wild ride. Like absolutely fantastic. Way better than I thought it was going to be. Like I didn't because I have a philosophy guy that I was going to bring on later on. I should have just stuck with you. But he'll be great to talk to as well.
I'm enough of a nerd that I've got a shallow base in many different things.
Yeah.
I
that's always the best kind of conversation. And those are always the best kind of conversationalist, the many hands in the many baskets kind of situations. So as far as your stained glass business, where do you want to see it in the next, let's say 10 years? Like what do you think it could become? And based on that, what would you want it to become, yourself included?
I mean, a lot of it's going to be based off of, like, unfortunately, under capitalism, how the economy itself goes. Like, I understand that in the immediacy, housing, and, like, we're going through what essentially is going to be a pandemic that leads to a massive amount of homelessness and a mass disabling event. It's going to cause a large number of able-bodied people to become disabled. So the cost of stained glass is one of those things that's always been prohibitive. I would like to figure out some way to make it less expensive. I know that a lot of that is a supply chain issue, and I don't really have anything to do with that. I can only get what I have at the cost that I have. And one of the things about stained glass is like the reason why Amazon can't kill the retail sale of glass is because it's one of those things that there's no inexpensive, easy way to ship glass. There's just not.
No.
You're always going to get some breakage, which is the reason why large shipments are preferred, because if you have a small amount of breakage in a large shipment, your overall sales are pretty much the same. If somebody orders a very small amount of glass and then more than half of it shows up broken, you just lost on a lot of sales. So I would like for the hobby aspect of it to come back. I really would like to be able to make it less expensive for people to pick it up themselves. so that people can continue to have it in their house. Because stained glass is one of those things that until you have it in your home or it's actually installed, you don't understand how different you can make a space feel with just a stained glass window. And it doesn't even have to be with like a change of color or anything like that. You can put in a window that's entirely clear textures. That's actually more common now. And it will completely transform the way that a room looks just from the way that light plays through it. So if anything, I would like to find some way to proliferate stained glass before it fully dies off. Like, I want to do videos where I can teach how to do leaded stained glass, because the video that you saw of me with the APOM, that's called Tiffany style, copper foil style. That's more common for smaller pieces. You can do it for larger windows, but for the traditional old school way of doing things, you used lead cane. And that produces a different type of window. It's not just the look, it's also the durability. It's going to last a lot longer. It's got stretch and give to it, so if it gets blown on by wind over the years, as long as it's properly braced, it can flex and grow so that it's not going to break over time. Which part of the reason why I still have so much repair to do is that wasn't really possible until the late Victorian period, when they started adding lead to the tin that they used to solder. Before that, all the solder joints would break because they were harder, but they were more brittle.
Okay.
So now that we have all of the kind of technology that we needed in order to make windows that will literally last forever, essentially, I'd like to be able to proliferate regular people being able to make that. Because it's nice to be able to teach people to make small sun catchers or something like that, but there are some people that I've met that I've taught them how to do stained glass, and like they would be great at producing full large scale windows. Like I can tell just based off of the way that they approach working on a window and the way that they're precise about everything, that all they would need to do is learn that little bit that you need to understand how the structural integrity works on a window, and they could do mind-blowing stuff. And I'd really like to be able to proliferate that. There was actually I don't know if they're open right now, but there was a group called Commonwealth Preservation Trades. They opened up in kind of like the poorer urban section of my city, specifically with the intention of teaching people at very cheap or free classes how to fix up aspects of the old construction on their homes. Like a lot of people can easily put up maybe like drywall if they need to fill a hole, but if you got plaster walls,
oh yeah,
that's hard.
You're kind of
so
fucked.
they started teaching stained glass restoration. I did a little work with them, helping them get supplies, and they sent people to me who wanted to like learn more after they learned how to just do the repairs. But that was really, like, I thought that was so much fun. I was so excited about that. There were other artists I talked to who are like, "Are you kidding? They're taking away your business. Those are people that would be your customers."
No.
Somebody that's got plaster walls and a broken stained glass window and a house in that area of town, they can't afford to have me fix it. That's not even me trying to say that they're poor. I couldn't afford to have myself fix it if I lived over there. Like it's nobody could. These are really big, ornate, old windows that were made to show off that these people were multimillionaires, at the turn of the century when these homes were built. Like, there's no way that you can fix something like that for an inexpensive amount of money now. It was never intended that way. So proliferating regular people knowing how to do this and being able to easily access the information, I want to do more with that, which is kind of a weird thing to say because none of the things I've just described make money. But
yeah,
that's really my goal, is to proliferate people's ability to expand on their knowledge of stained glass. You can find tons of videos that'll show you how to make a little mushroom or a little, feather or something like that. I want to make ones that will explain to you how to design a window. where to know where the stress points and the fracture points are going to be. The problem is some aspects of this are difficult to get across in video form. You just kind of have to get a feel for some things, which is why you can probably tell from this, my camera is terrible. If I can get enough money from the stimulus, I want to get a better one that I can like articulate and have over my shoulder so that I can do more in-depth classes.
Oh yeah, no, those kind of videos are fantastic. I know a lady, Princess Etch, where she has like this overhead camera. She does Etch-a-Sketch designs, and I'm like, those videos are fantastic. Like when you were doing the APOM, even though it was at that kind of like weirded angle, I mean, it was still a fantastic video to look at.
Oh, that was nerve-wracking. The way that I did that, I have somewhere in this building, I have a tripod with like the boot on it for putting a phone onto it. Like I actually own one of those. I don't know where it is. I have searched everywhere. This building is huge. So there's 3 floors, the shop, plus a bunch of living space. I've looked everywhere. I can't figure out what I did with it. So to do that video, I took my phone and put it into a table vise.
No.
Sideways.
That is hysterical.
So I'm sitting there going like, I'm going to destroy my phone. I'm going to destroy my phone. So I took a piece of like broken or like rag that I ripped off and put it around it just so there was a little cushion between the sides of my phone. But I essentially viced down my phone to a table in order to do those videos. It was nerve-wracking as hell the whole time.
Man, I can only imagine, man. I can only imagine. So tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, this is a little stupid because I when I first started doing social media, I never had any intention of connecting it to the business. So on Facebook, I am Louisville Looking Glass. On Instagram, I'm Lou Art Glass. And on TikTok, I'm Rasputin, spelled Raspute, and then the number 10, because that was never intended on being a business account. That was just the internet handle I came up with when I was 11, and I've gone with since then. So,
I'm sure you can change it. If not, you can.
Oh yeah, you can. It's just there's so many people who are like, but that's what I know you as. I'm like,
yeah. You might as well. You might as well.
But I'm like, it's different on 4 different platforms. I really have to figure out some way to fix it. I don't want to start new accounts, but I might have to end up doing that. Yeah, who knows? Maybe when I get my new camera and start doing the longer format videos, maybe I'll have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all right. Well, man, it has been fantastic having you on. Thank you so much for coming by.
It's been fun. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. See you later. Thanks, everybody.